I think one of the most difficult aspects of my life throughout the years has been the resistance. Maybe that's a good way of looking at it or thinking about it, is the resistance to accepting the fact that life is complicated. It's difficult, of course, complicated, and there are no answers. There are no ultimate answers. In spite of all the promises, I was thinking about that verse. I think it's in First John. It goes something along the lines of we can know that we have eternal life because we believe. We can know matter of factly. I remember that as a common evangelical theme back in the early days of really the theme of eliminating doubts around your faith and knowing with assurance. Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Those kind of ideas that if you got really good at it, so to speak, you could eliminate those doubts about Jesus and God and all that. But as I've come along and as I've opened up my thinking processes to consider other avenues and consider other thoughts, of course, primarily around the idea of evolution. And I certainly understand why Christianity and why creationists, especially fundamentalists, believe that evolution is such an evil thing, because it will, in fact, destroy their faith. It's a faith killer. There's no doubt about it. Let me start with just a little bit of an illustration that came to my mind this morning when I was out on my walk with Abby, and that evolution. The reason I find evolution plausible is not because of the answers, but because of the process, because of the nature of the evidence and the ability to put that evidence together to create a collage of sorts, because it's not a perfect picture. It's not a complete picture. It's a collage. A collage of snapshots through history, whether we're talking about cosmological history or biological or geological history. It's a snapshot. It's a collage. We put those things together and we're able to piece a fuller picture. Polaroids, so to speak, the Polaroids of history. Whether you're looking at geology or you're looking at cosmology, we see evolution scientists have been able to string together this, and consequently it's produced libraries of information, libraries of evidence, and furthermore that have allowed these researchers to build workable models, models that are repeatable and predictable. That's one of the cool things about evolution is some of the things I've learned over the last few months is that evolution and scientists who have followed these models have been actually able to predict things, and that have come true, something that the Bible has never been able to do with any accuracy. The Bible's predictions are ambiguous. require interpretation, are disputable, etc., etc. Yeah, I think of the illustration of the astronomer who, and forgive my ignorance, basically figured out the timing of Halley's comet and was able to predict its exact the event of it whenever we were going to see it, and he didn't do that from divine revelation. He did that through mathematical computation, and did it rather well. But we have in the evolutionary sciences a library, a vast library. Not all of it's right. I don't expect to be all of it right. I expect some of it to be wrong. I expect some of it to change. It goes back to this idea of the theme of this recording is that I'm more content now with not knowing. It's okay not to know. I had posed this question to myself a few months back: which is better, to know or to be in the process of knowing? And we would almost instinctively say, "Oh, it's better to know." Well, unfortunately, life doesn't work that way. Life doesn't give you the answers that you wish you had. I wish Christians could be honest about that, more honest about it, rather than claiming these ultimate truths, open themselves up to the reality of life that it's difficult, complicated, and doesn't offer answers. And if I use that illustration of the Polaroids, the collage of snapshots, certainly religion in the past has had a larger library, but their library is rapidly shrinking because they can't add anything new to it. Creationist scientists don't contribute anything to the discovery process, anything of notoriety. It's only the argument over the past is all they can argue. Arguments over the past and trying to lay claim to the whys. God, in that sense, God does not help his own cause. His absenteeism, so to speak, has I think it's finally caught up with him. And if there was a God, if a God did exist, I think at this point in life, in this point of our understanding, he's done a very poor job. And the information that he did give us in the ancient texts has been just poor. It wouldn't even pass elementary grade testing. You can't validate any of it. But that's on him, and that's on creationists and religionists who insist on holding those views. But back to my thought that it's scary. It's really a frightening thing to realize that you're alone. It's a frightening thing to realize that there are no ultimate answers, that there's not a safety net. If you choose to see it that way, you don't have to look at it in such dark terms. Life is a beautiful thing. It's a marvelous experience if you can learn to experience it without fear. But it's fear that drives the need for answers. And I don't mean to be condescending in any way, but people who must have an answer as to why we're here or what's going to happen to us when we die and all of those kind of things, it's a reaction of immaturity. It's the same thing as a child, an adolescent being afraid of the dark in their own bedroom because they're afraid of what could be. And they don't realize that there are no such thing as boogeymen. There are no such thing as monsters in the closet, etc., other than what Hollywood produces for us and other than what religion produces for us. Excuse me. God is more irrelevant to me now than I mean it, God is like a distant star that I can barely make out in the night sky of my own mind. And although the analogy doesn't hold true, he's getting more and more distant to the point of vanishing altogether out of my reality. And I'm really quite comfortable with that. It doesn't. And in some ways, I feel sorry for those who are stuck in fear, stuck in superstition. I've also thought over the last few weeks about the Christian belief in Jesus and all that. Do you really, do you really believe that? Do you really believe it? That 2,000 years ago, a carpenter, if he was that at all, died on a wooden cross, and his death was so meaningful that it appeased the eternal creator of the universe. It's just so ludicrous that we would trust, much less derive a belief system from that kind of an idea written in a book by men who knew nothing of biology or cosmology. They didn't even understand why didn't God even tell them the most fundamental of facts, the most fundamental of information? And I know that Christians always say, oh, that's not the point of the Bible. The Bible is to produce a relationship with God. I would challenge any Christian who holds that view, who leans on that argument, that defense of their faith, that apologetic defense, that you would not dare raise your children in the same way that God has, quote, raised us. Would you? One-sided communication, ambiguity, elusiveness, not giving them facts, but instead giving them fears, to be afraid of hell, to be afraid of God. The book of Proverbs says at the beginning that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, or maybe knowledge, whatever. How wrong is that? You say, oh, fear doesn't mean what you think it means. It means respect. No, it doesn't. It means fear. Otherwise, God wouldn't make such threatening statements in the Bible. I do now when I look at the nature, the so-called character of God. I think he's a big, giant asshole. If he existed, he's a real asshole. He's mean-spirited, capricious, all those other things. And so to respect that is the same of respecting a psychopath. Um, to admire that, to worship it, is even all the more worse. It's been an interesting and a long transition, but um, even with the fears, even with the absence of answers, the absence of a safety net, so to speak, if one chooses to look at it that way, I still realize that my life is far better off than it ever was under a religious model. I think I've mentioned in other voice messages and other recordings that I've done along the way that I've been surprised at how quickly a great number of anxieties fell away once I let go of God in my life. And it's been It's been it's been very beneficial. I feel like mentally I am just so much more stable than I've ever been before. It doesn't make life any easier. It doesn't make life better. It doesn't fix anything. It doesn't correct anything. It just none of those things that Christians either outright promise or at least imply in faith. Um, None of those things came to fruition in my life. I know other Christians say, "Oh, you don't know the Jesus, then you don't know the Jesus I know." Well, what I would say to that is, you don't know honesty as much as you think you do. And if you would submit yourself to an honest interview, I think you would realize very, very quickly how, if you were honest, how rapidly those so-called promises or intimations of assurance broke down in your own life. Well, I think that's all I wanted to say for now. I'm looking forward to continuing. I don't know how my life will end, what the value of it will be. At this point, I kind of doubt that it's going to have much value. I think I'll be um, just another biological life form that transitions into the greater pool of cosmological biology. But I'm okay with that. Um, God knows there have been billions of others who, just like me, contemplative, hopeful, well-meaning, etc., have passed on, and are now forgotten to the annals of history. And I'm okay with that.